Hey, team players, and welcome back. Today's going to be a big, fun one, guys. So let's make this happen, answering all your questions, going through your comments. You get just me for the first half of this show. Bob's going to be jumping in. He actually has that normal job, and we're going to be having the answers going out from there when he comes back. So let's jump in the order we get it. First off, as always, we love everyone who has adopted the quick hitter and deep dive format. Simply putting QH in front of your comment or deep dive, depending on when we're doing the longer shows, particularly on Tuesday and Wednesday. It makes a great deal of difference, and we love you all for doing that. That being said, Abraham, let's kick this thing off. Getting offered Cup and White for K9. I accept, or if I accept, the playoff roster is Lamar, Kyron, JT, JJ, Cup, Kittle, Flowers. Your bench is White. Yeah, man, I think that's a smash accept without really even thinking about it. Basically, it's either do you want to have Cup or K9 for fantasy points. I'm torn on who I'd rather have. For me, it's a no doubt I'd rather have Cup. It's not even close to me. For a couple of reasons. First, you look at this roster, you're already set at the running back position. So even if you say, all right, JT, he's not as stable as he used to be, the JT of old, White is still producing if you want to bounce him out. I wouldn't do it, but you could. So, Abram, when I look at this lineup entering into the playoffs, assuming you don't need to win this week, that is, you're set. There's nowhere that you have successfully achieved what you're supposed to achieve in creating a good roster throughout the season. Your bench has essentially only one extra of each position, in your case being White and Ridley, and you've gotten rid of the rest of the fat, and you have upgraded throughout it. This is a perfect example of how to do this. But to your further question that's tearing you here, I would way rather have Cup than White. And my bias in default settings is I'd rather have the back. But with you having two set backs like that, that's where I'm going. Austin. Boys, we are out of the playoffs. So this week, the villain arc has begun. Austin, that's only because you're like 6 leagues, man. One of your leagues, you're 11-2. If I win this week, you'll be able to eliminate your boy from the playoffs. That's always fun. I'm trying to think about dropping all my players since it's the season of giving, trying to show some fun in the league. Now it's over. No, that is anarchy and chaos, and 100% should not be encouraged under any circumstances. That is not okay, Austin. Do not cut all your players just because you didn't make the playoffs. Nor should you do the opposite and try to hoard a specific position. You should have to still play it out with dignity. Making the playoffs in one of my leagues, and I'm in a 4-way tie for second in another. I have a tiebreaker of like 50 points. So that's all good stuff. Again, Austin, a lot of leagues, this will happen in some of them. But at the end of the day, do not start cutting people just because you feel like being nice. And if you want to put your team up here to go beat your boy, we're all for that. Jason, welcome back. Got 45 left. Is 30 enough on Grenada? Jason, I basically look at it like this. If you're already in the playoffs and he's going to be the extra piece to put you over the top, the answer should be all of it. Because your roster is going to be set. There's not going to be anyone that you're going to need to pick up. Here's the other point. If your league is administered correctly, people who are not currently still alive in the playoffs shouldn't be able to pick up players. So therefore, the amount of fab you need during the playoffs exponentially declines. So if you're in a 12-man league and only 6 makes the playoffs, half those teams' fab is irrelevant. Next week, now you're down to 4-2, and obviously that's the end. So what I would say is if you want them, more importantly, if you don't want someone else to have them, you go all in. Because with 6 teams out this week on buys, there's not a grave likelihood of needing to pick someone else up in terms of a major stud going down. If anything, the studs are returning. I know that this has been the year of chaos in terms of injuries, but the reality is that most big time injuries happen before week 6. This was a fluke, but this also was a guy who was hurt before week 6, just coming back unable to do so. So I look at this and say, hey, you can go get him, but I do it for all the money. And Grenado is the one to get. I just wasn't able to upgrade the background guys, so don't worry about Mason. He is out. So with Mertz or crush with Ertz, on the bye, which tight end do I want? If I have to rank these ones in a quick group, I'm a starter, and that the other one's going to be out. It would go Ferguson. I'm not totally sold on Freiermuth. Cincinnati's defense is just really bad, and he had a blow-up game. It feels a little bit like chasing points, but I don't want to touch Komet at all. So it would go Fergie, coin flip between Noah Fant and Freiermuth, and then Komet on the back end. And then on your last question here, Dobbs or Wandale, I can't touch the Giants. When we look at total 4 projected for the week, the Giants, only projecting to put up 20 points in a week versus the Pack Attack, which is looking at almost 4 points more, which is really significant. The other part is that's going to be a shootout. I get the Thursday Night Football is weird. You want to avoid it, but you're looking essentially at the number 3, maybe even Dobbs is up to like 2.5 option on his team. I'd rather go with Dobbs over Wandale, especially as the greasy wheel is better than him and very greasy. I'm in a league where I'm tied for second. And the league where I'm in the playoffs are 2 different leagues. I already got you, Austin. I was very clear on that. You got this, dude. We're going to keep pounding this through and getting your wins. On my waivers right now, if you want to do 30 for Granado, 9 for Jake, 0 for Dobbs, your last 48, I just need to get this win to get the bye. So that's an acceptable route. I also think it's possible, and you're going to know your people better than this, you might be able to do it for less on Jake and Dobbs and put them in the Grenado. So that's always a possibility. You know them. Personally, I would go with more than 30, but it also depends upon the remaining fab of your competitors. If I looked around and I was playing you and I had more than yours, I would just put $1 more than your max. And so you can look at that option to go around. If you're all in the same ballpark, that's there. But again, I'm not afraid to do 100% this late in the year. I also need to point out that it's possible the Niners become a sinking ship. They're not totally out of it yet, but they are a team. This is like kind of Western General does this, that they'll fold the reserve for next year. And that is something that, not outlandish for Shanahan. He has had years where he has less than 5 wins and then goes deep in the playoffs the next year. Part of this is that embedded belief that says, if you're not going to have it, save it. And he does do that. So there's a little bit of cause for concern with the Niners overall. With Ott not playing, who should I pick up? Johnson from the Saints, Freiermuth, Disley, Kraft. You also have Reed. You're leaning Freiermuth, but you're not sure. So, Tyler, I do believe that going at Freiermuth is a lot of chasing points. He had a big blow-up game against the Bengals, but then again, who doesn't have a big blow-up game against the Bengals? Being here in Pittsburgh, one of the things we like to do is point out how bad Ohio sucks. And depending on how you want to cut this at 35, 33, or 30 points, Cincinnati is the only team to have lost a game when they've scored 35 or more points. And they've done it 3 different times. So Freiermuth was a beneficiary of that. He has, prior to this game, been essentially fantasy dead the whole season. That being said, he's playing Cleveland this week. It might be an opportunity to step up. We saw what Denver did last night to this team. So there is reason to say maybe the Freiermuth train lives on for part 2 against Ohio. Other than that, I understand your concern of not wanting to double dip on the Packers. Fair enough. That's why you keep bringing it up. You don't want to double dip on the Packers. But as I look at this, I still am on the Disley bus. I know that a lot of you guys yesterday were like, we all hate Disley now. I'm not saying it's time for that. Games in Kansas City, so weather could be a factor. But overall, Disley has been a growing part and a stable part of that Chargers offense. With the running back concerns they have, they're going to have to put up some points. Not saying they're going to have to put up 80, but they are going to have to put up some points. And it's an interesting matchup in that Kansas City Chargers game in general, but Disley is the one that I want to look at. My number one problem with Johnson is essentially the problem that I have with the Saints. They have a mindset that if it works, we're not allowed to use it anymore. It has been consistent and it has been horrible, but that's what they do. So what I don't want from Johnson is what I'd fully expect will happen. He'll get one catch for a touchdown, and then he'll get no more targets again. So if I had to rank these guys, which is what you're asking me to do here, Tyler, is I'm going to go Disley, Kraft, Muth, Johnson. Jesse, yo, welcome back. If you can't get Westbrook off waivers, would you drop QJ for either Allen or Thielen? No. I'd rather have Johnson over both. Couple of reasons. First is looking at beyond just this game, but at rest of the season, Thielen is in a process of getting phased out, and there's a very good chance the same thing happens to Allen. Allen has no previous year credibility in Chicago, and let's face it, he's not a spring chicken. He's going to phase himself out eventually anyway. QJ is the young future up and coming, and I do believe there's a lot of value to that when you get into late December, aka your semifinals and finals. I'd rather have QJ on my team for that. But again, I'd rather have Westbrook Akine over both. Steve, welcome back. Jonnu or Njoku? Both have been excellent. Yeah, I get Jonnu, though. I mean, the long story short is that I know that the Steelers-Bengals was 1,000,000 points on each side. And I understand that the first game was in that bleeding snow on Thursday night between Pittsburgh and Cleveland. But historically, when these two play, specifically in Pittsburgh, it tends to be a lower scoring game. Primarily because Tomlin prefers playing a lower scoring game and Cleveland's defense doesn't do as well on the road. So what tends to happen is Pittsburgh chokes out the clock by running the ball. They get less possessions and it's not a shootout. So it's going to hurt Njoku's probability of putting up points. Jonnu, on the other hand, I mean, that's Miami's really, that's what they do. We have Miami as being a higher scoring team this week than Cleveland. In fact, we have Cleveland as one of the lower scoring teams this week. So when you add it all up, there's a very strong correlation of real life points scored to fantasy points produced. So I'm going to go with Jonnu, who is quite frankly a higher weapon in terms of percentages on a higher scoring offense this week. I'm going to go with Jonnu in that department. Next one up. Ridley or Reed? I'm going with Reed, man. Everything about this Thursday night screams fun and points. I'm excited for it. Remember, this is the only Thursday night of the year, aside from maybe week one, that you're not on a short week. Both these two played on Thanksgiving. They're going to be fired up just as they would be on a Sunday matchup. And if there's one thing I know, either they win this game or Green Bay is going to lose. One of the best quotes over. It's how you start a dynasty. That being said, the Packers aren't taking that laying down. And I think that we're going to have a lot of points on Thursday night and fire up Reed especially, but basically fire up any Packer you got. I'm a big believer in more total real life points translates much better into fantasy points because the correlation in the math is there when you truly dive into it. Made the playoffs of the 8th seed. Hell yeah, John. Love it. And I'm playing the 1 seed who has with a crappy team and finally got into a dynasty league. Dynasty leagues are amazing. Congratulations on making it. Hopefully your playoffs are not this week. And if they are, maybe you get luck on the buys. They should not be this week for the record. But if it is, hopefully it is something you're able to make it out with. But congratulations on making the playoffs, John. I know that you entered with us later in the season, and glad we're able to see some things turn around to get you into playoffs. Because when you first threw your first question at us, things were bad and ugly. And I'm glad that we're able to get here. But yeah, feel free to shoot at any of your roster questions because we're always here to help. Seamus, Jameis, or Levis. So I this is not conspiracy camp time. I introduced this yesterday. I have a really strong feeling that I already know ESPN's off-season reports. And that is going to be Tennessee is the team to watch. Finish so strong. If you look at Tennessee, the rest of their season is crap. They have one real game, and it's week 18 against Houston when Houston won't be playing anyone. Levis is going to throw up a ton of points. This could be a scenario where they build him up because he doesn't play anyone, and then he implodes. But that's a next year problem. The reality is this year, rest of the season, and this week, I like Levis more than I like the crab legs. That's why he's not playing anyone, and he now has 2 weapons he can throw the ball downfield. And there is something to this in terms of team building that maybe you don't want to have an old, established, maybe even crusty and crappy veteran receiver with a younger quarterback. You see when they leave, sometimes things get better. You're seeing it with Levis. You can make an argument. You're seeing it now with Allen, now that Diggs has left. Because Diggs was there when Allen was still young. So there is something to that. By the way, if you're in Chicago, this is your only reason to have some form of hope. So I point that out and say, with that being said, Levis is who I want to go with. I do think that he's going to be able to blow it up, and they're going to have something really good growing with the young receiving core there now that Westbrook is turning it up. Yes, Lamar is on a bye. That's why there should not be playoffs this week. All right, so I traded Connor and Brown for Amon in my dynasty. That was a great trade, dude. So first off, James Conner in terms of dynasty value is really subsiding. He's going to age out pretty much. He's already an injury risk. And in terms of Chase Brown, a very strong argument can be made that he's only taking off because there's no other back in town. He could be Joe Mixon forever, but he's never been profiled to be as talented as Mixon. So when I look at what you're giving away is 2 assets that probably, at least pretty close to probably, have already maxed out their value. To get a perennial all-pro in a Ma, yeah, getting a Ma is absolutely what you want to do. Because especially in dynasty leagues where the benches are so long, you'll always be able to fill it in with the next, maybe they'll become a home run guy. Go out and go get a Bigsby type, and then maybe he's the home run next year. The kind of people who might be out of sight, out of mind. But I think you absolutely did a great thing here. Brown's season took off because of situational help, mostly Moss getting hurt, and it really benefited from that. So there's no guarantee Brown's production is here to stay next year. John, I love that trade. You nailed it. All right. Ferguson's just coming off of a concussion. So yeah, that's the thing is that if Fergie's not playing, you gotta go with Shoemaker. You have to be able to pay attention to it. That being said, whether he's off concussion or not, if he dresses, he's gonna get the targets. That's just the way that it is. Picking up Myers as the streaming kicker, dude. Nick, the only Myers that registers with me is Jacoby Myers. I'm gonna let Bob defer to all kicking questions. drop Dell for Leggett. You can make that argument. Leggett is at the spot where they're definitely investing in him moving forward, and they're not really doing it with Dell. So you can make the argument. I'm okay with that. For this week specifically, we're looking at Carolina obviously scoring points this week, and Dell's on a bye. So you can get away with potentially just getting Dell for free next week and having the same conversation as you enter your playoffs. But I don't that. But I do think that having Leggett around might not be a bad play for you either. Start 3. All right, so bench 1, another way of saying this. The 2 Rams, Marv, and T. Higgins. So, again, keep track of all the health going into this because this one probably is going to solve itself. In the event that it doesn't, I'm probably going to be benching. It's a hard one because Cincinnati doesn't stop anyone. They always end up in shootouts, which makes me want to lean Higgins. Look, regardless, I'm starting the 2 Rams. I'm starting both of the Rams. I have this feeling they're still making the playoffs, and those 2 are going to be the ones that carry them into it. So I am starting both of the Rams, and I'm probably starting Higgins as the 3rd, although there is a good chance that the injuries will take care of that self before you get there. Put a claim in for the Eagles off the waivers rights. Yeah, you should. The Eagles are going to have an absolutely great time at it. Yes, the Eagles defense is going to be one of the better defenses this week. Carolina is not what you call oppositional force. I'm right with Disley. Good. He's a good matchup considering he's tight end 1. Yeah, I mean, he is. He's the tight end 1 for his team. And you're right. It is a good matchup there against Kansas City. Welcome back, Nino. My deadline isn't until the end of the week. So I'm looking at getting a nice receiver for the playoff push, aiming for London right now. Okay, I mean, that's totally fine. Let's get into what the trade you're talking about here. It would be send Debo, B-Rob, Brooks, and Tillman for London and Downs. All right. I need to know the other 2 players you're going to pick up off the waivers. I do feel like, on the one hand, this trade should not be accepted. The only reason you would accept this trade is if you still believe in Debo. That being said, assuming you have 2 studs at running back, which is Nino. Oh, you did put your roster up here. Good. So your running backs right now are Bucky and Brown. With your bench being, you're trading bench pieces. You're entirely bench pieces to go get London. I'm okay with that. Yeah, Nino, I'm okay. That's what you should do entering the playoffs. Get rid of the bench to go get there, and then worst case scenario is Downs as your flex. That's not the end of the world. Drop Dell for Westbrook. Yes, Nick, I am 100% on the book for that one. Westbrook is an up-and-coming part of that offense. I broke down yesterday how people are making the comparison to him and Christian Watson in the sense that both of them have an incredibly high rate of touchdowns per time touching the ball. The major difference between those 2 is that Westbrook's role is clearly defined in terms of where he is in the offense, and he's not fighting the other 3 guys for looks. He is clearly his spot as the number 2 look. The other thing is he had 0 injury risk in comparison to Christian Watson. So I'm all for getting on Westbrook. Again, the matchups Tennessee is playing the rest of the year are absolutely atrocious. You get Jacksonville twice. You get Cincinnati in there. And the only quasi defense they play is the Colts. So I am all for Tennessee picking up Westbrook and Levis for that matter. All right, I felt like using Warren as a fill and flex for injuries, and I know he put up 10 points this last week, but he does scare me with Patterson getting like 5 touches with Najee out. So Patterson, and the way the Steelers' backfield is there's not really a replacement for Warren. Patterson is basically Najee's replacement. Najee went out. If you didn't watch the game, Najee went out in the first quarter. That's mostly when Patterson got his love. So I'm not going to really worry about that, because when they do the Najee doesn't get a drive, it tends to go to Patterson, and they will sprinkle in Warren as the receiving back regardless. So I understand fears for wanting to use Warren, but it shouldn't be Patterson. The fears for not wanting to use Warren is he's essentially dependent upon catching the ball, which is not a problem. The thing is that when the Steelers play Cleveland at home, historically, they play run the ball out, submission-based football. Because historically, Cleveland's defense doesn't show up, and the Steelers can run the clock out, and Tomlin's okay winning 17-7. So that's what they're going to shoot for. Plus the fact he just saw Jameis throw 3 picks last night. That's 100% going to be the game plan the Steelers want to operate. Warren doesn't function in that game plan. So it's not Patterson I would worry about. Really the end of the world either. There are 6 teams on bye. There is a lot of obvious injuries, but overall, looking at the metrics of the league, this is one of the lowest scoring weeks we've had in about a month and a half in terms of projected points for as a league as a totality. Big part of this is 6 teams on a bye, but that's the other reality of it. There's just not a ton of teams projected to put up a lot of points. Really, it's only Tampa and Philly. So if you don't have them, it's looking at a spot where 10 points in your flex might win you the league, or the week at least. Flex Pacheco, Westbrook, or Tillman in a standard league. Also, which defense? Well, certainly not Jacksonville's. So running back core, full discretion. I love my running backs probably more than I should. I'd go with Pacheco. I love volume. This is the kind of game that Kansas City, they play physical against the Chargers. It is very much a mindset thing. We're stronger than your finesse team, and we're going to make you feel it. Pacheco's the guy who nails that hammer home. So I said that metaphor backwards, but you guys know what I mean. So Pacheco is who I would go with there on the first part there, AT. When we look at points against, which is how I really gauge which defense should be you use. I know there's these other metrics of sacks and all that, but in general, sacks are pretty hard to assume. So when we look at points against, Miami is projected to have one of the absolute points against this week. And that's why I would lean to Miami over the other two. So that's just how that answer is. I think Jacksonville's going to get blown out the doors, and they shouldn't even be considered. I don't think I saw Warren touch the ball until the third. That's totally possible. I think he got 1 check down in the first quarter. Warren is going to throw up a lot of touchdowns, my man Wamba. Don't quote me out of context. You know I love you. Drop Darnold for Tua. Darnold has been pretty consistent, but Tua has been balanced. There's no doubt about that. Miami is sitting there just waiting for Denver to mess up. And historically speaking, it's not a bad bet. And Tua, while I'm not liking the style of his game, he is definitely doing what you need to in the fantasy sphere. So I'm okay with that. Darnold is leaving a lot to be desired, but that's how I would look at it. Oh, John, it was A.J. Brown, not Chris Brown. Again, I think it's still rather have a maw. It's a much more balanced trade that it was A.J. Brown instead of the other one. But I think I would still rather have a maw. I'm okay with that. I'm just less excited. Start Goff or Tua. I'm going Goff. Just so many points are going to come out of that Detroit game. I'm going Goff. We have them as the 3rd highest scoring offense this week, being Detroit. So yeah, give me Goff. All right, we already answered that one there, Nino. All right, Austin. I wasn't able to do a 2-for-1 for premier tight end, but I added Jono on the waiver wire. So you still got a premier tight end, dude. You just have to pay for it. So make no doubt, Jonnu Smith is a premier tight end right He really has picked it up. And as long as these injuries keep plaguing Miami, he's going to stay there. In fact, he might have actually already cemented himself of regardless staying there, much to the chagrin of this motor owner over here. Welcome, Bobby.
Hey.
Broncos and would you start the Bills versus the Rams? No, unless that game's in Buffalo, the answer is no. So I get your Broncos are in a bye. The team you want to pick up is Philly. If they're not available, Miami is a very good one. They've been hitting a lot of waiver wires as people have been bringing it up. Is that a hockey jersey or Seattle?
Oh no, it's just my cheap Burlington Coat Factory $10 Seattle Krakens. I mean, you'll see.
So what's Seattle?
You've seen me in the Seattle Seahawks one. I mean, $10. I mean, you can't pass it up. The fact that does exist in Pittsburgh is crazy.
Get the Kraken going.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right.
They kind of still have the best hockey player. Digression. All right, pick up another defense and a QB. All right. I lost the thread of where you were at in there, but the team you showed me earlier was championship worthy, and I wouldn't really mess with it. All right, start 3, full PPR. You're making me do work here, Austin. But we'll hit them up as we get to them in order.
Oh wait, did that trade from the other day?
Wombo, Westbrook.
No, I was just talking. Never mind, I was just talking.
You're reading ahead before we get there. You're supposed to be patient. You're supposed to teach patience. You're a skull teacher. Westbrook King playbook is just a picture of straight line. He runs it over and over again, and then he gets tired and takes a breather. Yes, and here's the thing. They can't stop it. That's how Chase Brown started in this, or that's how Jamar started in this league. It's how Randy Moss started in this league. He's not going to be anywhere neither of any of them because the dude can't do a cut. But they have a guy who doesn't care if he throws interceptions because how much lower can you really get on him? They benched him for Mason Rudolph, for crying out loud. He has nothing to lose. He's chucking it, and Akine can outrun people. It's a really actually not a bad idea to just do it when you can do it. The problem is when teams don't do it and they just let them run and then no one cares. And you always get that clip. Oh, it's wide open. Why don't you throw the ball? Well, because your quarterback's afraid.
Well, I want to go back to this Nino.
All right, George, my trade from yesterday.
Joe, slow down a little bit. I want to get into Nino's question here just a little bit for a moment. I think another really respectable enough defense that's flying under the radar a lot that we don't get a chance to talk about often is the Arizona Cardinals defense. Okay. Arizona Cardinals are going into Seattle. Seattle has been known to turn the ball over a bit. I think it's a very interesting experiment, especially as I'm sitting here just going on Fantasy Pros real quick, looking at their 9th in sacks in the league. They've got 6 interceptions, 12 forced fumbles, and 7 fumble recoveries. Okay. So they're on a team, they're going up against a team where it is very likely that they're going to be able to put up those points. Granted, they might not be able to stop points from being scored, but they are a good enough team if you are looking for something to fill in. If you don't have the Chargers, for example, if you are not able to go out and get the Eagles or with the Broncos on the bye, I think it's definitely worth considering. And again, if the Steelers defense for some reason isn't owned, it is also respectable enough to see what they could trot out against Winston. We just saw yesterday, Winston, despite him throwing 4 touchdowns, he threw 3 interceptions because he's going to pass the ball a lot. So while the points will be wildly not in favor of anything, there is a good likelihood of interceptions to be caused, sacks to be caused. And I like that. When I'm looking at a team, I really want to look at, and for anybody that has a defense question today, I really want to look at teams right now that cause turnovers because unless your league scores like 7-8 points for keeping somebody under 12 points, something like that, it really would benefit you to play to the strengths of certain teams. So for example, for anybody looking for a defense, right, look at teams that are not completing a lot of passes. but still pass the ball a lot.
Basically, people playing the Colts.
So if you're passing the ball a lot and not completing a lot of passes, there's a good chance that there's going to be some opportunities for some turnovers. If a team is running the ball a lot and they're going up against a team that, is good at recovering fumbles and can cause fumbles, that's what I'm looking at. Even if the team is likely to score a boatload of points, as long as it's not going to put me into the negative. Like Tennessee, if you rocked Tennessee last week, you got 0 points. They put up a boatload of points against them. But if for some reason they were able to get a turnover or something, that would have went into your favor. So, it really depends upon your league scoring. But that's, I think, right now when we're looking for, with longer, when there's big defenses on buys, that's kind of what you've got to look at. And hoping that you can cash in on one of those, or even like a lesser defense, like you were talking about, Joe. Like Miami's not causing a lot of sacks. They do have 7 interceptions. But the fact is that there is a likelihood that they could get a couple more of those this week. So it's definitely worth your time to consider even a not so great defense. But if the matchup plays to the strength of that defense, it's worth considering them. So that's just right. Kind of the long thing for any defense question today.
So George, my trade from yesterday, Mason and JSN for Collins, was vetoed with the commissioner. So I need to win Grenadier off waivers to proceed the trade. So I mean, I get it. This is why trades should go through immediately. I get that. I'd get out of that league as soon as the year ends. Yeah, Wumbo, you're right with us as far as hating trades, but the realistic part is that going to have to go and spend your fab to go get it to make the trade happen, I think is stupid. I don't think you're necessarily in a bad spot if you don't get Collins. But this is why, like I said, if the trade happened and it was successfully achieved, unless it happened as the news was breaking and you just happen to know it first because of inside information, there's no reason to be vetoing it. So George, I feel your pain, man. I feel your pain.
Yeah, and vetoes, as Mr. Wumbo said yesterday, it sets up precedents. We talked about this with the with a couple people yesterday, where you have a team with the CMC trade that we were talking about yesterday. If you set a precedent, especially if the commish sets a precedent, that's not really a league I want to be in unless it's a group of friends, right? Because there's going to be constant complaining and moaning, going back and forth to be like, well, why didn't you veto this trade? Oh, it's only because of you. I mean, you either allow all trades to go through, or you figure out, or you figure out something else. I mean, especially when the league commission is involved and all that stuff, it gets really hairy. I mean, it sucks, but again, your team's still in a good space, so I'm not super concerned about your team going forward, that there would be any issues.
So, Denaro, I answered this one earlier. Denaro, I answered this one earlier for you. Feel free to go back in the show. But the long story short is this is Levis without even having to think about it. Austin.
Disagree. Joe, I disagree.
How do you disagree on that?
I can give you many, many reasons why, after watching the game we saw yesterday, that in a good weather circumstance, that Jameis Winston can put up good numbers against the Steelers. We just saw Joe Burrow do it too. Okay. I mean,
I know Burrow did it. Burrow has weapons. The other fact is it was in Cincinnati. Historically speaking, when the game is in Pittsburgh, it's never a high scoring game.
And it
just never is.
I get that, but also my concerns for Levis still ring true today as they did yesterday, in that if you take Will Levis and you put him down to 25 passes, if he's completing under 60% of those passes, it doesn't matter what that performance.
So you're basically making the same argument you made earlier in the years. Jacksonville sucks so bad they'll stop throwing on them. And
yeah, I mean, I think it.
When you're a down team, you don't do that. You don't stop throwing.
Right, but Jared Goff did the exact opposite. So I see where your point is. I see where your point lies, but I also know that Tennessee's not as good of a team as the Detroit Lions are. And Tennessee is going to have to hold on to the ball if they want to win this game because, to be quite honest with you, Jacksonville is far away from a lot of teams in the league, but Tennessee's not that far away from Jacksonville in terms of, skills and abilities in a lot of areas on defense. So,
no, we fundamentally disagree on that.
I mean, when I look at it, it's a very real possibility that they're going to allow the run game to be a lot. I still think that Will Levis has a good game, but Jameis Winston's going to keep chucking the ball 30, 40, 50 times a game, and Will Levis isn't going to do that. So that's my only one variation to you. I think Levis is going to have a good enough game.
I don't think Levis needs to do it. I also think the fundamental fact is the Steelers are going to hold them under 50 total plays. That's the difference. They're going to just run like they always do. They're just going to run the ball out against Cleveland, so Jameis can't be on the field. And then when he is, he'll be pressured and they'll pick him off.
That's a very real possibility.
We just disagree on this, but I'm on Levis both this game and forever, and the rest of the season. Tua or Herbert?
You must really like Mayo then. Oh God. On Will.
No, it's. I like the schedule. I don't believe in. I don't think Tennessee will take their foot off the gas.
George, I believe you were with us. Correct me if I'm incorrect, George. Back in the offseason, I believe it was you that was talking about Will Levis, okay? Asking us and saying why is it maybe not a good idea or a good idea to draft Will Levis in best ball leagues? And Joe, adamantly,
I did say this,
was against the Mayo. Correct me if I'm incorrect on that one. And now you're on him.
No, you're right.
I'm going to keep your word on that one. I'm going to keep your word on that one.
Reality is Jacksonville's defense, I didn't think was going to suck this bad.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm going to remember
in Jacksonville.
That's all I'm saying. I'm going to remember it. You remember
it. Dude, for real. You look at these defenses he's going to play, they're all horrendous. I take this matchup all day, though.
Forever. You said forever.
So I'm going
to hold you to it.
Oh, you mean never like Levis? No. The worst part is so many new bad quarterbacks that come in. He's no longer the worst quarterback forever. That guy might be in Chicago.
Yeah. Well,
if we're not counting Watson, that is.
Here's the thing, Austin. It is Herbert. For me right now on Tuesday, it's Herbert. I think what we see, especially against the Chiefs, is their run game without J.K. Dobbins is decimated, okay? Absolutely decimated. They could not control the game on the ground as they have done in the past. The Chiefs already have a good enough run defense, okay? It's not tip tops, but it's good. And so in order to win this game, it is going to navigate its way through Justin Herbert. Now, Justin Herbert disappointed us this past week, I believe, with only 7 or 9 points. That game script was very much wildly different than what we were expecting to happen. This one is a divisional matchup. They're going to use Herbert. It is not out of the realm of possibility that Herbert throws for 30, 35 passes in this game. With 30, 35 passes with Ladd, if healthy, it's going to make a difference. Now, with Tua also is going to pass the ball 28 to 35 times in his game. Now, the only question that I have is that the Jets like to keep the ball in front of them because the back end of their defense is really putrid. So if Tua can somehow get over the top, there could be a lot of great plays that happen. But Tua's ADOT is so low because he's passing the ball to Achane and at the line of scrimmage, letting playmakers make plays. And there's a good chance that they are going to make plays. So I could see myself, depending on how I'm viewing this matchup and the game script, possibly weather, because Kansas City is not out of the realm of possibility that there could be snow, rain, whatever happening there. I could see myself pivoting off Tua because I don't see a lot of variation in terms of how many pass attempts these two quarterbacks are going to get. It just depends on how their pass catchers are going to make plays after they catch the ball, because that's going to be really important in this matchup. I think both of them pass for over 30 attempts, but I think it's more likely that Tua does it. But I don't know what the yardage will look like for Tua, if you get what I'm saying, Joe.
So if I'm breaking that down, I think you said the biggest variable in this is how shitty is the weather in Kansas City.
I think so, in my opinion.
All right. I mean, they are pretty tight this week, so that's fair. Yeah, dude. Jonnu Smith is awesome.
Jonnu's a goat. In my one league, somebody dropped him a couple weeks ago, then picked him back up, then dropped him again, and then picked him up. This is the same guy that has Trey McBride and had Sam Laporta at some point in the year. I mean, he's making out. He talks about Jonnu Smith all the time. Jonnu is going to. I think Jonnu right now, along with Trey McBride and a couple other tight ends, are set it and forget it tight ends. Even if he has a bad performance, you cannot not start Jonnu. Okay, he's getting the volume of a wide receiver too, and you can play him in the tight end spot. And many people are playing him in the flex spot because, let's face it, guys, if my league has 3 wide receivers starting and 2 running backs starting, and it's a 12-team league, I know we said this earlier in the season, and this season is proving to be very much varied from past seasons where you didn't want to start a tight end. Jonnu's floor is not the same as a regular tight end's floor. Mm-mm. It just isn't, because the volume is so massive. Jonnu is a good player for this team, particularly because Tua will not throw the ball deep.
He's what Ingram was last year. But before you get into that, George, I did not change each week. I change as the matchup and the data changes. But that being said, DJ Moore is still not a guy I want anywhere near my roster.
He hasn't talked bad about DJ Moore. It is true.
I haven't talked good about him either, though.
But I have maybe made you change the corner on DJ Moore. I don't know.
I don't know about that. You're not getting me past that quarterback.
Vidal or Gus. I have Pacheco, so I have to drop one and take Pacheco off our AT. I mean, I know it's going to dictate that Gus will be the play that you want to keep. But honestly, to tell you the truth, at this point in time in the season, I'm taking the younger player. The value of Gus is really, really known to us right now. And it's been known to us since Baltimore, is that if Gus is able to get goal line work, it is worth starting Gus. However,
he's going to get all the work now. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Dobbins is on the IR for the rest of the year, right?
But there is still Vidal. There is still Haskins. And I just don't see a pathway where they're going to utilize Gus to get 3 yards in the way that Baltimore was utilizing Gus to get 3 yards. Okay. I just don't, I see a pathway that it could happen, but that means that things are going to have to fall apart for the Chargers prior to getting to the 5-yard line. And to be honest with you, the Chargers right now are a team that if you're going to the 20 or if you're going to the 15, it is more likely that they kick a field goal than score a touchdown. That's what it feels like in my perspective.
So you'd rather go with Vidal because of the higher upside?
I think a younger, higher upside at this point in the season is much better to kind of compartmentalize, particularly because with Pacheco back on your roster, you are most likely not starting either of those guys.
That's true, too. You might as well swing for the home run.
I'd rather keep the younger guy because he does have a better opportunity for a home run. But there's always games that Gus could be 40 yards, 3 touchdowns. So I'm not writing that off, but it is a little bit more annoying for sure. Let's get to Austin's quick hit here, and then we'll get to some of those deep dives, Joe. Start 3 full PPR: BTJ, JSN, Tyreek, Jacoby, Jameson, Juwan, Jennings, Hopkins. Okay, I'm going to start with this, Austin. As I feel on Tuesday, I mentioned this in a lead a little bit yesterday, but I'm on AOC this week. And I know people are going to crucify me for that. And I know it sounds unreasonable, but I'm looking at this matchup, and Tampa Bay's secondary is bad. And they're especially bad in garbage time. So if this game gets to garbage time, it is a very real possibility that AOC hits 28 to 32 pass attempts. It is very likely that he goes for 225 yards. And by the way, as long as he's the quarterback, Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers have been getting a huge amount of targets.
That is true.
So following the volume, I'm not dictating this is going to happen all the time, but following the volume there, I think that Jacoby Myers has to play for you this week. Okay. That's where I'm going to start, at least on Tuesday, because of the way that this team funnels targets to these players, and the lack of run game in Las Vegas, I think it's a necessity that if they're going to win or have a chance at winning, which they don't do a lot, that they're going to do that. So I think that's a starting point.
I don't think they win again the rest of the year, by the way.
I think that's a starting point right there. So I think I'm fully on Jacoby. I could be, and Joe, I haven't looked at all the matchups today. It's been a busy day, but my initial lean on this is to definitely try to get in JSN as well. JSN the last time.
So JSN is at Arizona.
The last time that these teams met, he had a great game. Now, granted, once DK came back, I mean, DK dropped some targets in the end zone and things like that, and maybe JSN wasn't as fully involved there as he could be. But I think that the starting pivot to where I'm at in the discussion for these wide receivers is, for you, Austin, is to look in, and the reason I'm on JSN is more the volume, and same as Jacoby Myers. And I think my pivot for this third wide receiver is, which one of these wide receivers do you think has the best chance to score a touchdown this week? All of those wide receivers that you're mentioning do have some concerns with either quarterback play or volume. Okay. Jamison Williams is volume. Juwan Jennings.
Yeah, it's gonna be a high scoring game.
Juwan Jennings, quarterback play. Hopkins, target share, volume. And BTJ, quarterback play. But we do know that when Mac Jones came in, BTJ was still a relevant target for Mac Jones.
He was. That was surprising. Mac Jones had a decent enough scoring for only playing a half and a quarter.
And I'm not saying that BTJ and Terry McLaurin are very closely related, but we see that the Titans are struggling in the secondary without certain players. So I monitor that. That's a guy that I'm interested in. Tyreek is another guy that I'm interested in, as well as, players that could take the tops off of the Jets. Okay, so if the ball gets to Tyreek and Tyreek can get behind defenders, this could be a really good game for Tyreek Hill. Jamison Williams is an interesting play against the Packers because, again, these divisional matchups, especially Thursday divisional matchups, could be a really intriguing
Well, just remember, Bob, this is the only Thursday of the year that's not a short week because both these guys played Thursday last week. So this is going to be like a regular Sunday game with lots of fireworks.
So the question that I have before I look into the numbers this week is that where's that volume going to come for Jamison Williams this week? You guys know that I'm super high on Juwan Jennings, but we've got to see a healthy Brock Purdy.
Yeah, we do.
And I'm not going to take the snow game as an issue, but if you want to follow volume, I think your volume plays would be a Jacoby, JSN, Juwan Jennings. I think if you're just following volume, I think that's where you want to be at. But if you want, if you're taking two guys that have a highish floor and you're shooting for a home run, your home run will probably come in regards to BTJ or Jameson. Okay. So that's kind of where you at. It depends on if you already have a high enough floor and you're shooting for that next thing, then maybe you go Jameson. I think that's my initial lean today. Austin would be Jacoby, JSN, and Tyreek. But, all of those guys really have a good framework this week to be stellar. I just have to look into the numbers a little bit more.
So the Texans had a chance to stop Westbrook in week 12, but they didn't. Aziz Eder. Dude, he's pretty good at knocking players out of games, dude, and he's now out for next 3 weeks. So that was something interesting there. Stop with the Colts. All right.
Let's get into a deep dive here, and then we'll return to the quick hitters.
All right. So George, you'll be the return to the quick hitters. My dynasty lineup is Burrow, Barkley, Monty, Ahmad, Puka, Evans, Jacobs, DJ Moore, Kittle, Pittsburgh's kicker, Aubrey. Any changes? Well, first off, John, we're all about the going in deep, so you don't need to apologize for nothing. Barkley, Monty, Ahmad, I love the I think your dynasty is in a really good spot here. The only thing that I want to upgrade moving forward, and this would be getting rid of none of your current starters, is I just want to have the next receiver in the wings, and so next year you can trade Evans. That's really the only thing I'd want to do. Like if you could tell me you can trade Evans for Brian Thomas Jr., I would do that just because I want to get younger. But the rest of your team, I absolutely love. I mean, Puka and Amon are 5-year studs at least. You might have an issue with Monty, but that's still 2 or 3 years away. Same with Saquon. Yeah, like I said, I think you're in a really good spot for where you're at. And like I said, I like it. You know, maybe if you can get like a Jonnu or someone on the back end for tight end support, because tight ends always get hurt. But I don't even know Jonnu's the tight end I want moving forward. It's mostly this year because they're not throwing the ball downfield.
I mean, the tight end you want is Bowers, but he's going to cost you a lot.
Yeah, you're never getting him.
You know, Sam Laporta in Dynasty is especially an interesting one to continue to keep my eye on. Utilization looks like it could increase, but again, he's going to be a little bit more varied in terms of his production abilities. I think that also I'm still going out there looking at guys like TJ Hawkinson. Trey McBride would cost you a little bit too much. A sneaky guy, John, and a person to keep your eye on to Joe's idea here is to go out and look at Noah Gray. We talked about Noah Gray a little bit yesterday in terms of redraft leagues, and we compared him a little bit to players that are currently playing. But with Kelsey looking to transfer power over from Kelsey to another tight end, it's still a Patrick Mahomes-led offense. I would be looking to target a guy in that discussion like Noah Gray. I'm just checking his age, but the situation is right. He's 25 years old. He's proven that he can catch the ball a lot. I'm looking at him really intently to see, okay, what's going to happen there. It's also interesting to look at guys like Tommy Tremble and Theo Johnson as back-end tight end options to keep your options open. Because, again, those situations are going to be highly variable. One of the things that Joe mentioned is to keep looking at wide receivers, especially in dynasty leagues. We've talked a little bit about Nick Westbrook-Akine. One of the guys to also keep your eye on, John, I don't know how people are valuing him in your league at all, but Keon Coleman with the long injury, somebody to keep your eye on. Yoshivas from the Bengals with the potential of Higgins moving on. There's a good chance that either him or Burton, if they don't go out and get another guy, could be on the radar, could be on the menu. You're not going to be able to go out and get a guy like Roma Dunze at this point in time in the season. So, all of those players that I mentioned are players that I'm definitely interested in to see a little kickback on the back end. Another guy we talked about on the show, Coker, probably not going to cost you a lot, but could have some value coming down the pipeline for you. Joe, the guy I mentioned for certain for John to look at is Noah Gray. We've talked about him on the show a lot. Probably not going to cost you a lot. I mentioned Theo Johnson, Tommy Tremble in the tight end market. You might even want to explore some running back options. Garendo, Mason, picking up Mason, who could be a good play going into next
Mason
year.
will get valuable touches even if he's not a Niner next year.
Yeah, so it's just I think it's just something that you could definitely think about, John, as you go through thinking about your trades. There's just some slight changes. I wouldn't make any huge changes this year, but I would be prepared in the next 2 years for an Evans retirement, and I would be prepared in the near future for Kittle to for something to happen with Kittle. And the same thing goes with injury concerns for like a Jacobs or an Amon-Ra. I definitely want to kind of float my boat in there. And like I said to John earlier, Joe, Yoshivas and Jermaine Burton are guys from the Bengals I'm keeping my eyes on, especially
Burton more than Yoshivas.
If Higgins decides to leave. And then
Higgins is leaving. You don't need to question that.
But then also thinking of, the heir apparents for the Buccaneers, potential the Raiders with like Trey Tucker. There's always an option for those guys as well, back end guys that could have some value this year, but you're most likely not going to start. So those are kind of the guys that I'm looking at right there.
Oh, you're doing the other DD. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And then Jesse here, in terms of the deep dive, 7 and 6, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. Who do I start between these guys? Lamb, London, Jennings, Addison, MHJ, Pacheco, Tracy. So the first guy that I'm on here, Jesse, is in my flex is Tracy. Tracy this week has a really good matchup.
Wait, you're going Tracy over Pacheco?
I really think, I mean, Tracy has a good matchup, man. I mean, when you look at things, and this is just my initial lean on Tuesday, I've got to look at the numbers a little bit more, got to take a look at the matchups on the O-line. But looking at what Alvin Kamara did to this same defense last week, and it is perfectly possible that Tracy can do that as well. It's not an indomitable defense by any means. And I think that they're going to be able to move the ball a little bit better. I could see a good game from Tracy. My primary concern with only Pacheco is...
But you said that backward. They're playing the Saints. Kamara didn't play against the Saints defense.
Well, yeah, sorry about that, against the Giants. But I still think that Kyron Williams had a good game against the Saints. So I think that you can profile those guys, Tracy and Kyron Williams, you know, as runners in a similar-ish capacity, with Tracy having a little bit more explosion. So I think that Tracy is a good play. Pacheco is also a good play. But again, how much are they going to run the ball against the Chargers in that game?
Oh, I think a ton. I think that this is the game where they always establish they're more physical than that West Coast team.
I think that Tracy's volume is a little bit more in place right now.
Oh, that's true.
I'd have to look at a couple of things to make like an even decision on that. As it goes to the other players on here, Lamb's a must start if he's healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, the Bengals secondary hasn't been able to stop much. The Lamb is a must start if playing. And likewise, I think that London, before I even look at anything, is also a must start because the Vikings have had trouble stopping things as well. So if you
that's also the come home game for Cousins, you know, London's going to show out. I think that's the right call. The only spot, so Jesse, the only spot that we disagree at is Pacheco or Tracy. And Bob's answer is because you already know what Tracy's volume is. And I just project Tracy to be back or Pacheco to be back. I think this is where he's coming up and showing out. And this is what the Chiefs tend to do. That's my
initial Tuesday lean, Jesse. It might change, but I don't see myself.
But they win the division when they beat the Chargers, and I think that Pacheco's the gun who does it.
And that's fair. That's fair. I don't see those other. I mean, MHJ could be a nice play, but this is the second time that they've seen the Seahawks defense. Maybe there's a couple different looks. And Jennings is a good volume play if Purdy's healthy. So there's a lot of pivots that you can make, but I think Lamb and London, if healthy, have secured enough volume that it makes them worth your while against defenses that are susceptible to passing attacks.
And on that note, think about it. The Bills clinched that division with 5 games left. Everyone said Miami was going to be so good this year. Here, I'll give you one, George, that was on the entire year. The Bills are going to win that division because they're the only adults in the room. And what came to pass? The best coach ran away with it.
I love it, George. But yeah, I love stuff like this. They do this a lot on like ESPN and on just different things on X, where they put up a stat sheet and they say like, which quarterback is this? And one of the most interesting ones was these comparisons that I saw with Daniel Jones and Trevor Lawrence before. It was weirdly and eerily similar, which is definitely something super scary. So I think it's something that's an interesting look at when it comes to fantasy football in general. Would you rather trade K9 for Kupp straight up, or would you do Kyron and Ridley for Kupp and James Cook? I love James Cook this week. I really do. But I think that I would be super comfortable Just moving K9 for Cup straight up.
Yep.
I mean, you keep Kyron and JT. Both could have a good amount of volume. You're keeping, but at that same point in time, Ridley doesn't feel like a necessity for you to keep. So if you feel, I like the K9 for Cup straight up. I think you're trading an asset for an asset that, could Cup's volume is going to be better than it was this past week. But if you feel like you want to keep K9 instead, either way, you're dealing with a wealth of riches there. So Kyron and Ridley are very good volume plays. If they get the volume, they're going to show out. Whereas Cup and James Cook, they have different values within the frameworks of their teams. Cup can be a volume play, but he doesn't have to be. James Cook definitely isn't a volume play, but he makes plays. So, I like both. It just depends on which one you feel more comfortable in. I like the first one a bit more. And there's a great deal of margin with how I like it a bit more. But if you want to go out and get Cook, and you'd rather have Cook than Kyron, I think it's reasonable that you can complete that trade as well. And heck, I mean, I would even try to float K9, Ridley and Amari for Cup and James Cook if I could do something like that. But it doesn't seem, Abraham, like that person wants to do it. And I feel like Joe feels the same way, that the first.
Yeah, I want to do it straight up. I just want to do it straight up.
And he likes it a little bit better. Allen, Jane Daniels, Lamar Jackson, Will Levis on the Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks currently this year. There's something that all of those quarterbacks have in common. Joe has talked about them a lot and has badmouthed Lamar Jackson, has badmouthed Levis, has badmouthed.
I have not badmouthed Lamar nearly as much.
It's Josh Allen. The only one he hasn't.
I have not gone with Lamar nearly as much. I drafted him a ton, dude.
You love Josh Allen. The league I have Allen in has a boner for quarterbacks, so I have to hold on to Tua now, because if Allen goes down in the playoffs, I'm stuck with like Bryce or Rush or Aiden, and screw that. I mean, Mr. Wumbo, there's very good reasons to say that and to keep Tua. I mean, I think Tua, despite the A-dot, I mean, he is going to throw the ball a lot. And he has playmakers on his team. So as long as a quarterback who has a low A-dot has playmakers on his team, there's going to be some modicum of success there. Ronald, who would you all roll with week 14? Well, it's not Kirk Cousins.
No, it's not Kirk Cousins.
Despite what I said about the Vikings having a decently, a good enough team to pass on, I'm not falling victim to that as I did with Joe Flacco in my DFS lineups the 1 week. I mean, they are capable of causing a lot of turnovers, and it benefits the receiver more than it does the quarterback. Joe has made a very good argument, Ronald, if you were with us earlier in the show, about why Will Levis is a good play this week. I gave you a reasonable argument about why Jameis Winston is a good play this week. And Derek Carr, he's an enigma, but the pass catchers are just not that good. So unless he's throwing the ball,
not that good.
Unless he's throwing the ball to Marquise Valdez-Scantling, and Scantling is able to get 2 touchdowns, I think the floor for Carr is 1 touchdown. Especially with the way that game could go. Will Levis has a floor of 2 touchdowns. I think Winston has a floor of 2 touchdowns. It's just where do you feel the matchup is better? Will Levis is less likely to get intercepted. I mean, that's just to be quite brutally honest. Out of any of those players, Will Levis is less likely.
He's playing the softest defense of the group.
Get intercepted. I mean, and here's the other thing about Will Levis. Will Levis, Jacksonville has allowed like a 64% completion percentage or 69% completion percentage on the year. And if Will Levis is able to get above that, which he has at various points in time, it will be a successful enough game. Just as a note here, Jacksonville only has 5 interceptions this year. The Giants are sitting there with 1. So Derek Carr could be a great play because they don't intercept the ball at all. But I'm definitely out on Cousins because Minnesota's 18 interceptions this year. I mean, after a guy that just threw 4 interceptions, you cannot rock with Kirk Cousins. There's just no way to help you there.
Kind of
and the Steelers have 13 interceptions. So, out of that, will Levis and Carr have the least likely chance to get intercepted? How many touchdowns are they going to throw?
And I think, for your question, who is the highest upside? I believe it's Levis by far.
Nino talked about the first offer, but now it's Debo, Brian Robinson, Tillman, and Brooks for London, Tua, Downs, or Thielen. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, dude, I think that's the first offer. You just gave me the or Thielen option. I'd still take Downs, but I would still do that trade. Give you London. You're out on Debo. That's fine. London's a volume play out of it.
Yeah, the only player out of that list, I mean, Brian Robinson is a tough one to miss, but it's disappointing.
They're all his bench play. He showed us his bench.
Yeah.
All of them are on his bench.
Yeah, I would do it because London immediately slots in as a starter. And it's dealer's choice on Downs or Thielen. Downs will most likely, when healthy, come back. Will have his volume again. Is it good volume? Maybe not. But is any volume from Bryce Young great?
He's going to be a bench player.
Maybe not.
Because what's going to happen is London is going to take the flex spot. London isn't even going to break into his top receivers.
Let's see. Need 2 flexes. Monty, James Cook, Jerry Jeudy, Jennings, Devonta Smith. I think you can't bench James Cook this week. I do have to look at the matchups a little bit more so we can talk more about this tomorrow. But I think Cook is a phenomenal play this week. As it goes for Monty, I said yesterday that I really can't get myself into a discussion where I bench Monty, and I think that I'm going to hold true to that with this moment.
As you should.
But it would be irresponsible, and I typed this out to Tyler yesterday in the chat before we went on air, that it would be irresponsible to ignore the potential volume of Jerry Jeudy against the Pittsburgh Steelers in a game that actually might have good weather. In a game that had bad weather, we saw what he could do.
Oh, you totally could, because there's a chance Porter takes every penalty and never actually catches the ball.
It's fair. But I think that it would be irresponsible to ignore that. Jennings, I don't think you could start over any of those 3 guys right now with Brock Purdy's injury. I still love Jennings, still love the potential volume. And Devonta Smith, it's such a low volume passing attack that if Hurts were to throw the ball more, which this game, he won't have to. He won't have to throw the ball. Last week he should have thrown the ball more, and it didn't happen. So Devonta Smith, I can't trust. So how
bad are they going to be if they end up getting Saquon hurt because they didn't throw the ball enough?
But hey guys,
but Lipsy, my answer would be I would go with the 2 backs.
Lipsy, I'm going to put everybody onto something this week. If you go on FanDuel and if you go on DraftKings, there are lineups that you can build that can include Brock Bowers, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts. Okay. And the wide receivers will include guys like Jerry Jeudy, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, things like that.
Well,
but I'm telling you, you have the potential to have the best quarterback outing in a given week, the best running back outing in a given week against a team that can't stop the run to save its life. So I'm just putting it out there into the ether. There are some great lineups that you can build, and I'm going to be trying to do a little bit more of that in the meantime. Was thinking about dropping Stafford for Darnold, Murray, Russell Wilson, or just keep Stafford. It's very reasonable. The Stafford spot was disappointing. That game dictated with all the injuries that the Saints had, that should have been a nice passing game for Stafford. It was good enough. It was good enough, but it wasn't great. Russ had a phenomenal passing game against the Bengals, and that is something that, was probably going to happen, but to the capacity that it happened, nobody was expecting it to the capacity that it happened. Russ is a great play this week against the Browns, but keep in mind what Joe said about it is very possible that they could run that ball a decent amount in that game, and it goes down the chute fairly fast. Murray, you know what you're getting with Murray, Lipsy. I can't talk good or bad about Murray right now. You know what you're getting. You're getting a quarterback that can potentially put you at 10 points or potentially put you at 20 points. Are you okay with dropping that risk? That's the case there. And Darnold, to that same degree, since the beginning of the season, he had a hot start, But ever since then, he's kind of cooled off into that same realm between 13 and like maybe 20 points. So out of all these quarterbacks, they're all pretty much the same in terms of their respective floors. Which ceiling is higher? That comes to the matchups. And, this week, Joe, which one do you like better?
So I'm going to go with Stafford out of the group. But it's mostly because I've been scorned by Murray too much. But Stafford's a degree above Darnold regardless. And I think going at Russ is just chasing points. So I'd rather go with Stafford.
Yeah, and it's reasonable.
I'm already national 4:00 game. Yeah, give me Stafford.
I'm already fourth or third and locked in for the playoffs, so it doesn't matter that much if I win or lose. So who would you start as running back 2 and flex between Pacheco, Warren, Garendo, and Devonta? I think it's easy, Pacheco and Garendo.
Yeah.
The Bears, granted, they had a good enough time stopping the run game of Detroit on Thanksgiving, but again, a different atmosphere, a different style of game. This game, they haven't been particularly well at stopping it. I think Garendo, again, putting Garendo into DFS lineups, a lot of people are going to be doing it. He's like 5,200, super cheap on FanDuel, super cheap on DraftKings. He's going to be in a lot of lineups. I think it would be a great play to shoot for the moon, Garendo, Pacheco. And if you fall, it happens. But I don't think Devonta Smith warrants a start, even though it's a really good matchup against a shitty team. Josh, full PPR start 1. Shakir, Pollard, or Tracy. Also lost Taysom and only owned Pitts. That sucks. And the available tight ends are Freiermuth, Gray, Fant, Akinakwo, Tremble, Sanders, Knox, and Moreau. Okay, so couple things to think about here, Josh. And we can get into these numbers a little bit later. There's a really good argument to make that Pollard or Tracy would be a fantastic start here over Shakir.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take the snow game as anything against or for Shakir. But Shakir has a very low ADOT. Is he making plays? Is he going to have the opportunity? Keon Coleman come back. The narrative kind of shifts a little bit more. Pollard could be a nice volume play, but with Spears back, there might be an opportunity that Spears cuts into that volume against a very good matchup against the Jaguars. They don't have an offensive line to speak of, so they're going to have to make their own in there. So, depends on how much that volume goes. And I think Tracy, to the same degree that I said earlier about Kyron Williams against the Saints, he had a great game. The Saints can be susceptible to the run. I'm willing to throw my hat into the ring for Tracy right now as we sit on Tuesday, Josh, into that discussion. And in terms of the tight ends, right now, I think even with Freiermuth's blow-up game, without looking at anything and just looking optically back at the game that they just had against Cleveland, there's a good chance that Russ will find Freiermuth when he needs to. Outside of that, I think that Noah Gray is also a stand-up option. Not a high degree of volume or a high degree of target share, but he is becoming more trustworthy for Patrick Mahomes.
The thing you got to worry about Gray is Hollywood's coming back, so does that bounce him out?
So that's something to consider there. I also think, and this is something that we can look at a little bit more. I also think that the two New Orleans tight ends could be really valuable moving forward. We saw Juwan Johnson last year get people into the playoffs, win them games. Foster Moreau, although hurt, them two, it's always about volume, but they do get looks in the end zone. Okay. And when you're looking at tight ends, where is the value in the tight end? Is it in the volume or is it in the end zone looks? So I think if I were you, Josh, I would look into that a little bit more. And I would say, okay, which one of these players can get the most volume? Most likely Freiermuth, because there's no Darnell Washington does have, could take a little bit, but not too much. And then where's the opportunity for touchdowns at? I think in the market of tight ends you have there, Gray, Juwan Johnson, and Moreau probably get you a little bit higher in terms of the touchdown market, but not as high in the volume market. That's my initial lean there, Josh. I think I'd order it Freiermuth, Juwan, Gray, Moreau, and then the rest.
Yeah, and Tracy should be the one you're starting out of the first group.
Wumbo, not sure how healthy Smith is going to be, and it's against the Panthers, so they might just run the ball 45 times. It's very likely that Jalen Hurts runs the ball 10 times, and Saquon runs it for 50 times. I'm not.
To your second point about Goddard going to the IR, it seems that offense can only support Goddard
Joe,
Smith, but not both.
Noticed you didn't update the kicker, man. Wumbo noticed you didn't update.
I did not update that.
Ignore
we talked about that at the beginning of the show, Wumbo. We didn't show up late. But yeah, you're right. It's supposed to be Garendo.
We'll try to hide that. We'll try to hide that out of there. Top 5 here: Debo or Amari if McConkey sits. This is tough.
It's Debo. It's not tough at all.
Yeah,
Although it's in a dome, so Amari might not do horribly because it's not the cold game. Amari does tend to have one game when it's warm, when he leaves cold weather to go into warm weather where he blows up. Last year was when he broke the record with Flacco. So that is in
I'm
him.
okay to roll on Amari.
I'd rather go Debo though. And here's the reason is Amari's yet to solidify himself in Buffalo. And I'm not sure he will. Debo, at least they know what they're getting.
I get that. I mean, there is an issue with targets. I mean, for both of these players and touches, especially touches is like where the value is in Debo is his touches. It doesn't matter where he's getting them, if he's getting them, and he's not getting them. That's the primary concern there for him. Amari Cooper is definitely, the targets are a concern. It's the same concern that I have for a guy like Shakir as well. I just hope that McConkey doesn't sit for you because McConkey is at that point in time a league winner right now. My lean would be on Amari. Joe's would be on Debo. We could look at a little bit more. Dumb question, but Gibbs or Pacheco for this week? It's not a dumb question. But I think the lean is still on Gibbs. But Pacheco is interesting. It's interesting, but I'm on Gibbs, Jesse. Top 5. Pick one: Tracy, Rashad, Najee, or Garendo. I think all these players, minus Rashad White, have a lot of value this week. Najee, in terms of potential sheer volume, if they want to keep the ball out of Jameis Winston's hands, if they allow it to happen. Yesterday, I did say that the Broncos were going to have a hard time keeping the ball out of Jameis Winston's hands. That happened yesterday. The time of possession for Cleveland, when I checked it last, was in their favor fairly significantly. It might have evened out by the end of that game. When I look at it here, I think that I'm still on Tracy. The way I would order it would be Tracy, Garendo, and Najee. I think that the explosion potential for Tracy and Garendo is a little bit is more likely. Garendo especially, I think, is an interesting choice. Just kind of compartmentalizing what Gibbs did and what Monty did. Now, granted, the line for the 49ers isn't as good as the Lions, and that game script was a little bit different. So I still see that Garendo has a lot of value this week. So in your case, I might roll Garendo instead of Tracy, but I still think right now on Tuesday I'm on Tracy. How do you feel, Joe?
Yeah, but I think you pretty much nailed it. I think it's just where it's at.
Would I drop Dell for MVS? I would consider it. I mean, right now they're getting similar-ish volume, Joe. I mean, you look at it in terms of routes.
I can't trust New Orleans passing. I can't trust what New Orleans is doing.
Trust it, but Dell can't be trusted either. So I mean,
again, you just can't. You can't go with someone because the other one sucks. I mean, this isn't dating.
That's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing.
Basically, what you're doing.
No. I'm looking at the target shares are similar. Right now, who has the best chance to get a touchdown? And it's not Tank Dell. So when targets and volume is very much the same, who has the best chance to score a touchdown? Which one of these two players?
Yeah, I just think there's a better chance of a 0 out of Valdez versus Dell.
I agree with you that there is a higher, so Jesse, that's the way to look at it too. There's a higher likelihood that MVS gets a 0 than Dell. But there is a better likelihood that MVS gets a touchdown. So if you are rocking MVS in a lineup with guys with safer floors and higher floors, it is okay to go with a guy like MVS. But if you are looking for a floor play, Dell is a floor play.
Mm-hmm.
Dell is a floor play because MVS is a little bit lower. Would you drop Disley or Pitts for Juwan Johnson? I'm assuming, or Deontay Johnson?
DJ, no. DJ's done nothing in Baltimore.
And he says that he doesn't want to be there. He didn't play. So if that's Deontay Johnson, I'm not dropping either of them for Deontay Johnson right now. But I would consider dropping Pitts. I would if I needed another option. Would you guys start Purdy this week or bench him over Stafford? We would have to look at the injury report on Thursday and Friday. Looking at the injury report on Thursday and Friday will dictate a lot of what this decision will be. If Purdy is healthy, I'm starting him over Stafford. If he isn't healthy, I could pivot right back into Stafford very easily. What's the likelihood that both of these guys go off for 22 plus points? Maybe Purdy against the Bears, maybe. But the Bears don't have a terrible secondary, Joe. They are capable of stopping teams. Will they break? That's the question. Will they break by sheer volume if Purdy is going to be there? Do I think that Will Levis or AOC are better plays over these two guys this week? Potentially. Potentially. But out of the two, I think I'm still on Purdy. KJ, I won't be able to get Durendo due to the waiver order. Should I pick up Patrick Taylor? And is there any rumored running backs that the 49ers might sign off the street? I haven't heard anything. Nothing.
It also doesn't matter. It's too late in the year for it to matter.
I think, it might not matter for like their season, but for fantasy purposes, it certainly matters. I think it's reasonable.
No, all I'm saying is it doesn't matter for them to get integrated into the team fast enough to be fantasy relevant.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable, KJ, to go out there and we don't know what the capacity for Guarendo's health is either. And it's always good to take the next one up. So if the next one up is sitting there, you're not going to be giving up a valuable asset at this point in the year, and you could potentially get a valuable asset. Yeah, sure. I don't know a lot about Taylor, but I know that he's in the right situation where he's the next up. So I'd be willing to take a chance on him. 7 rushing attempts this past game, 3.6 yards per attempt. I'm okay with that for sure. Quincy, I need this win to get into the playoffs. I need 2 running backs, 1 flex. Pollard, Pacheco, Hunt, Tracy, Bucky, Brooks, and Jennings. Okay, well, just to start, if Bucky's healthy, you're not benching him.
Yeah.
If he's healthy, you're playing him against the Raiders. Granted, that looked like a potential juicy matchup for Kansas City's run game against the Raiders, and it didn't turn out to be that way because the touchdowns didn't go in the favor of the running backs. But it was still a good enough running game for them. So I think I'm starting there with Bucky. If Bucky's healthy and the hip's not bothering him, I'm playing him. And it didn't look like that hip was bothering him for the rest of that game. The other player I'm playing is Tracy for sure. Out of the grouping of players that you listed there. So that takes you to 2 running backs. So then you got to decide on the flex. And I think your decision process, similar to what we talked about, and we can talk more about this as the week goes on too, is going to be at finding where the volume is going to be at. So do you like the potential volume of Pollard or Pacheco more? Because it seems like Pacheco could get a bit more volume. Or do you like the potential for Juwan Jennings' volume? That's the lean there that I have on that. I think that where I would go would probably be Pollard. But I could talk myself into Pacheco and pivot really easily off Pollard, depending on how that, what we see from the week about Spears versus Pollard and coach speak and all that. Pacheco definitely has a higher boom because he's on a better team.
Yeah.
But don't forget that the Titans are probably going to have an easier time moving the ball. So if the Titans have an easier time moving the ball down the field, Pollard could set himself up to be in the red zone a decent amount. Maybe they utilize him a little bit more. It's good to see you. Who would I start this week? Pick 2. Gibbs, Jacobs, Pollard, Connor. Guys, I'm out on Connor. I mean, I really am out on James Conner.
Mm-hmm.
I've been out on James Conner for a while now. Just as soon as we heard news the other day, not even the other day, months ago, about them wanting to pull back the volume because he hasn't played a full season and all this stuff. Against a very good Vikings run defense, he was able to accumulate 68 yards. So that's on 17 carries. So, there is kind of a blessing in disguise in that discussion as well. But when we go back and we look at what he did against Seahawks last week or the week before that, not so great. So I'm not saying that that's any indication of what he'll do this week, but it's already a bad starting point. So I don't think you can be on Connor at all. Jacobs, if healthy, is a must start. I mean, regardless of matchup, if he's getting that amount of volume, even against a very good Lions run defense, if they're able to move the ball through the air and they're set up for red zone opportunities, he's going to get the ball at the 1 yard line. I mean, that's enough said. It's likely that he could go 17 carries, 60 yards, and he flames out no touchdown. But I think that he is more likely to get a touchdown out of this group of players. And then I think you have to be on Gibbs. But I would monitor the injury of Jacobs, and I could see myself pivoting to Pollard. But again, Pollard's just a tough sell right now if Spears is back and the volume is an issue. Because like Joe said a couple weeks back, if Pollard's able to accumulate 22, 23 carries, 25 carries in a game, he'll be fine. If he's not, it's a problem. So Jacobs, I think, is fine. I think Gibbs is fine as well. But if you don't like either of the matchups or the injuries kind of put you in a problem, I think that it's okay to pivot on to Pollard. Puka and London and Higgins at the flex. Would you start a back over Higgins or London? I don't think so. I think looking at the volume, looking at a Cowboys secondary who is vulnerable, all three of these wide receivers has the potential in PPR to hit 17 plus points. Okay. And it's very likely that all three of them go above 20. Okay. So with Puka being the one that maybe doesn't, I think it's smart to play all three of these wide receivers. I don't think that Pollard or Gibbs will get you more points than these wide receivers. I could be wrong, but I think the volume favors the wide receivers in that discussion. If Ladd is out, I'll be starting Devonta Smith or Tillman if these two can even go. And if not, to the waivers I go. I mean, it's a bad situation to be in, but there are some interesting things to think about. Wumbo, I'd look at players in the vein of like an MVS that, although the volume isn't great, they have high production upside. I think that's what you have to look at this week because nobody on the waivers right now is going to be the guy that's getting a lot of volume, minus Garenda. Yeah. So you have to look for the home run. So look at the matchups of, where do defenses suck? Maybe it's Malik Washington for the Jets or for the Dolphins against the Jets. If somehow Tua is able to throw the ball down the field, maybe he gets a long target. Steelers versus Browns. If Kelvin Austin is healthy, which it looks like he might not be, he could be a nice dump play. Just shoot it long, Kelvin Austin, past the Browns secondary. That's a very realistic possibility as well. Maybe a Mike Williams. There's a lot of pivot plays. Maybe, again, we talked about this. The Buccaneers secondary is bad. Trey Tucker didn't get a lot of receptions. He has gotten a lot of receptions in the past. That's a nice, hey, I'm shooting for the gusto kind of play right there because all those secondaries do have issues on the back end that right now you can't look for volume. And also, Brandon Cooks is still out there on your waiver wire, most likely, guys. Most likely nobody's been holding him. Came back last week, got 9 points in non-PPR, half PPR, 0.75 PPR points. Him, Jalen Tolbert against a Bengals secondary that's trash, also could be a potential home run. If one, I would actually rather start Brandon Cooks, Trey Tucker, or any of the guys that I mentioned over Devonta Smith right now.
Yeah, it's hard. It's rough for Smith. There's no way around that.
Should I drop Leggett for Thielen full PPR?
No.
I mean, there is a very reasonable argument that you can make that yes, you could. But again, Leggett's still getting his. And right now, as we said earlier about young wide receivers in the league, Thielen was looked to, later in that game a lot. And Bryce Young has a connection with him, but he also is developing the connection with Leggett. If you want to shoot your shot, I still think the shot is well spent on Xavier Leggett. But if you feel more comfortable with Thielen, I don't see a huge difference between them in terms of potential volume moving forward. So, it just depends on which guy I think that has the best chance to, be included in future matchups. I mean, again, this week, Joe, without looking anything, just thinking about the defenses that they're going to be running against. I mean, I wouldn't start either of them against the Eagles.
No.
I wouldn't start either of them against the Eagles, so it doesn't really matter at that point. And then against the Cowboys, I'd be more likely to throw out Leggett, I think, in that matchup. If you have a hyphen in your name as a wide receiver and your role is to run fly routes, do you have a higher chance of scoring a TD? Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, guys. When you look at
who was that one from the Colts who always just did that for you, Bob?
Who was that guy? I don't remember him right off the top of my head. But
George isn't in here, but who it is. The old one who retired like 2 years ago.
Idea here about team construction. If I have safe, high floor-ish plays, I can shoot my shot on a guy like this because I am guaranteeing myself or trying to guarantee myself a good return on investment, right? Mm-hmm. But if my whole team is shooting my shot like this, then it's a problem because if the shots miss, I'm out. I don't have a chance. Yeah. But when you're constructing a DFS lineup, it's always worthwhile to look in that, for somehow Westbrook-Akine is still 6,200. Valdez-Scantling is still 5,800. And out of everybody on the slate, they have just as much likelihood to score a touchdown in terms of everything else, except their touchdowns are going to be of the longer variety. I mean, we saw it with Marvin Mims. I said to Joe last week, I said, it's a shame that we don't have the Denver Broncos on the main slate because if so, the Browns can be beat deep. Who is the guy that beats them deep? And Joe's like, it's Marvin Mims. And I said, it's a shame that he wasn't on the main slate because he would have slotted in to so many rosters because he's so cheap. I mean, it just depends upon your team construction. If you go with high floors, you can play a ceiling play like this and be okay. Hoping Patrick Taylor. I mean, hey, if it happens, it happens. He could be the guy. Remember when
Patrick Taylor's not a good pass protector either. The thing is, when you're this far down the depth chart, there's glaring holes.
Yeah,
that's just the reality.
It's going to happen. Is it a smart idea to try and claim? Yes, it is.
Yes.
And I wouldn't be opposed.
Rico's the one I'd cut.
I'd drop Warren. I mean, Rico has proven himself to be a good enough player. In week 15, they play the Panthers. So that provides me with at least one more opportunity to start Rico in that. And Quincy, Juwan Johnson is the guy. Yeah, I'd drop one of those guys to pick up Juwan Johnson, like you were mentioning. I'd probably drop Pitts for Juwan Johnson. I still am holding on to hope that Disley could be a good enough play this week. But I like Juwan Johnson a little bit better.
Hey, kind of just as a side question, since we were thrown off on Johnson, is there any chance that Deontay has played his last game in the NFL?
No, I don't think so.
All right.
I don't think so. But I did hear he got traded to keep his toxic personality away from George Pickens' toxic personality.
That's 100% true.
I had both Njoku and the Broncos defense going last night. Trone, I was pulling for you just like I was pulling for Austin. Slam dunk, man. Slam dunk. Am I crazy? And Landon, I was thinking about you last night too. You needed something to happen, and you know,
You needed the Joker to do nothing, and that didn't pan out.
yeah. Am I crazy to start Isaiah Garendo over Kenneth Walker this week? You're not crazy. You're not crazy. And Jerry Jeudy over Ladd McConkey. That one has
Not on the second bus.
Both of these have legs, but you really have to monitor the Ladd McConkey injury. Okay. If Ladd is going into Friday and it's still like, oh, not a full participant, limited, watch for Saturday, watch for before the games. You know, it's a pivot that you can make because Jerry Jeudy's volume has been tremendous as long as Jameis Winston is able to pass the ball a decent amount. And Jameis Winston hasn't really. Let me just double check this. Joe, I just want to make sure I'm not, because my computer's running a little bit slow, so I haven't pulled up everything right now. But looking at the pass attempts, Jameis Winston in the game against the Steelers only threw the ball 27 times. Okay.
He also didn't try throwing in the snow, though.
Right. Every other game, he was above 40 pass attempts. So if you're following where that could go, if Jerry Jeudy is getting a 30% to 24 to 35% target share, which I'm pretty sure it's higher than
You're
that.
looking at 8 to 11 catches, or 8 to 11 targets.
Was talking about this as well. Gave him props for this in the comment section. You're looking at an insane amount of targets. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's comfortable there. As it goes to Kenneth Walker, now I'm not going to oversell Garendo's potentiality this week, but when we look at Kenneth Walker in the stat sheets, it's not nice, guys.
Okay? No, it's not.
And his floor is similar to what Garendo could get, with a bit more explosion from Garendo. So I'd be willing to float the boat on Garendo. Broncos D is on the bye. Hate to drop them. Wouldn't drop them. I have Gainwell, my Barkley handcuff, and Braylon on my bench. Would you drop either of them for a defense? You have to. You have to. And at this point in the season, Trone, if you have a defense that's able to get you points through causing turnovers, it would be irresponsible to drop them because somebody will.
Because you're going to be just fighting to pick them up now with everyone in the league in the playoffs.
Somebody will pick them up to be trapped, to trash you at another time. Now, I'm not answering this question because I'm not jinxing nothing. But I think I'm very comfortable knowing where my lean is right now. I'm just not going to say it because I don't want to jinx anything. Joe, you can give
you want the one instead. You want to keep the one who's on the higher scoring, better running back situation.
Yep. Here you go. Landon, my roster this week is Hurts, AJ Brown, T. Higgins, Kamara, Garendo, Jeudy Flex with Nico, Mixon, Walker, and Westbrook on my bench. I could see myself trying to find a way to work Westbrook into my roster this week, but I think that you are very stellar in what you got. There's really no point that I could see that is a glaring hole on your roster right now, Landon. I think that outside of the fact that maybe AJ Brown only catches 5-6 passes, what he does with them, what you could say. But again, Westbrook is less likely to catch a lot of passes too. So I think you've started your best players in that respect. Trone, best kicker option this week: Matthew Wright, Parker Romo, Aubrey, Elliott, or McManus. Lots of ways to view that discussion there. Joe does not answer kicker questions, so I will look at this right now. All right, so Cowboys, that game could definitely be a boat show.
It's the highest scoring game of the week.
You could potentially see two to three field goals out of Aubrey and maybe 2 to 3 extra points. I don't think the Cowboys are capable of scoring 4 touchdowns. There's that. The Vikings versus the Falcons. We just saw Kickfest Central out of, the Falcons and the Chargers. So Parker Romo, it's very likely that if the Vikings drives continue to stall where they're stalling at, that Parker Romo could get above 12 points kicking. I think it's likely that both Romo and Aubrey probably end up somewhere in that 6 to 12 range, to be honest with you. Jake Elliott, that's going to be mostly touchdowns. I don't see the Panthers stopping the Eagles at all. I think that's your lowest floor kicker, to be honest with you, Trone. Mm-hmm. And I think I'd pretty much throw my hat in without talking about the other kickers with Parker Romo or Aubrey. I think you have the best combination for field goals and extra points in those games. My initial lean would still be Aubrey, but I could definitely float my way over to Parker Romo. What are my thoughts on Palmer if Ladd is out? I know he did nothing last week, but no one but Ladd did anything for them. Okay, so here's an interesting
fact that's going to remain true for a while.
Here's an interesting thing to think about here. When we look at Josh Palmer, there was one, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, where Palmer had like 11 targets. And a couple end zone looks, but he didn't do anything with them. So the primary problem here with Palmer is, what is he going to do? Because if Ladd is out, and that's the other thing to factor into that decision of Tua or Herbert, Joe, is Ladd going to be out? Because if Ladd is out, Herbert isn't my play.
That's fair.
I don't think he could be at that point in time. But you look at it, last week or 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, he had 8 targets. The week before that, he had 4 targets, but he's doing nothing with them. And last week he had 1. Again, that was a weird game for Herbert. I don't see anything different. I'm not on Palmer. Any of those other wide receivers that I mentioned, Wumbo, is where I'd be at. If I get wanting to pivot off of there, but like I said to you earlier, those Cowboys wide receivers in the veins of Cook and Tolbert are 2 guys that I would much rather have with better upside than Palmer. So if Ladd can't go, those would be the 2 guys that I pivot to, and they're on Monday night. That's where I would be heading in that direction, Wumbo. Lipsy, we'll get to the next deep dive here in a moment after we answer Lipsy's question here. I want to catch up as much as we can on the quick hits. Would I be dumb not dropping Fairbairn? Because I know if I do, someone will scoop him up next week. I don't think it's ever too dumb to drop a kicker.
That's true.
Wumbo has talked about this pretty significantly in the chat a couple weeks back, where the first line of defense in dropping people is kickers and defenses, unless you have. And I know we talked weeks ago. People were saying, should I drop Minnesota's defense? And at that point in time, yeah. But right now in the fantasy playoffs, as it comes to it, you need to keep the Broncos. You need to keep them. You need to keep the Minnesota Vikings. Is it reasonable to drop Fairbairn? I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it is. But because here's the other thing. When you're looking at who else might be up on the docket, guys I just mentioned, Parker Romo hasn't played an entire slate. So, I mean, he's up there as a potential to keep on moving. You have potentially, who's the guy over here? Jason Sanders, if he isn't rostered as well. I mean, people are going to be dropping kickers this week. Younghoe Koo will probably be dropped by people. Will Lutz will probably be dropped by people. So it might be a kicker waiver wire next week to get kickers back. But I think it's reasonable to drop them to pick up somebody if you really need somebody. Let's get to Nino's deep dive here. Then we'll get back to the quick hits.
All right.
Here's Nino's team. What depth pieces should I trade to upgrade before the playoffs? 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 flexes. All right. Looking for depth pieces. Love the running back room. Super solid.
Haven't you thrown out a couple of trades where you were getting your good returns?
Honestly,
I like those trades you presented at us earlier.
Honestly speaking, Nino, you talked a little bit about the trades that you were trying to set up for yourself to move those bench pieces. But as I see it, I really don't see, outside of moving on from Debo. And Joe, you could pull up those trades again that Nino was talking about. Outside of moving on from Debo and outside of moving on from Brooks or, like Hunter Henry again, but Hunter Henry's volume is pretty good.
So he'd be London and 2 upper downs when he gets rid of Debo, B-Rob, Tillman, and Brooks. I think that's a great trade. I think you should do that.
If you can do that, Nino, if that's the trade that you can get done because you start 2 flexes, you're walking into every week basis where you could be starting Chase Brown, James Cook, Bucky, Jettis, Nico, and Terry McLaurin. I mean, I think
and London's your other flex.
Terry McLaurin's my other flex.
It'd be London and you're starting a third running back. I'm not.
Chase Brown, James Cook, Bucky. When healthy.
So yeah, I would start Scary Terry in London over Bucky. Of course, that's also matchup dependent. Either way, it's a great problem to have.
Yeah,
I would do that trade.
Do that, Nino. And there's a lot of good things to go in that. Is that you're crushing that potential depth that you have with Debo and Tillman can come back and be hot again. I mean, it realistically could happen, but Debo and Tillman are pieces that you could move on from. And you were mentioning, I believe in that chat, Brian Robinson. That clears up room that if you want to pivot to Tracy at any one point in time, you can pivot to Tracy. If I can get London on my team, I'm doing that. Okay, I am doing that, and maybe I'm not, and I might even be starting him over Terry McLaurin, based upon volume. So I think that what you're doing here is you're definitely upgrading yourself into a stratosphere that you can move a lot of pieces. And I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility too, Nino, that even if you didn't want to play a depth trade and you wanted to go out there and target a high value asset, you have enough other high value assets that you can make a reasonable trade to somebody for a very high value asset right now, leading into the fantasy playoffs. I know guys in your league are holding on to Bijans. They're holding on to the Saquon Barkleys, but you're a team that does have the type of capital that if you wanted to move into someone with a lineup like that, you could very easily do it. Maybe you decide that you want to go after a Kyron, or maybe an HN because he just is going to be the guy that continues to catch the ball. I mean, you could pivot like that, and then maybe Bucky isn't your guy, and maybe you're starting like an HN, a Chase Brown, and a James Cook. So I don't know if you definitely want to be looking at volume or looking at depth because you already have the depth. But if you're looking for better depth, that London trade definitely puts you in a discussion where your depth is going to be better, and then your back end depth is going to be relatively the same. So I would definitely, I'd definitely do that trade right there. And I think you'll be in a good place for it. Let's go here. Joe, we are at
I clicked
Mo Alley Cox. I love Mo Alley Cox's names, but I'm on Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, no doubt.
You could totally move Brandon Cooks or Jalen Tolbert. They're probably on your waiver wire. They're not on my waiver wire because my league mates have everybody. But like I said, I think that the pivot there is a stronger pivot than Josh Palmer, because then you're not questioning, do I have to pay attention to this game late at night and going in there? Just pivot to the next game. And Knicks threw it 42 times versus the Raiders. AR completed 42 passes the past 3 weeks combined. Joe, that's the thing that needed to be said about Bo Nix. Joe told me, hey, he didn't have a great game. Yeah, he didn't have a best game statistically speaking. Only went for 10 points. I definitely thought he was going to go for more. But it's definitely encouraging seeing that he is capable of throwing a dime on a deep ball against a team that he should have done that with, and he did it. So he's meeting my expectations. He's checking all the boxes. And while it wasn't the best game, he was going into that game hurt. Very disappointing performance in terms of fantasy points, but optically he did enough to win the game and the defense bailed him out. So, I mean, it's always good to have that kind of balance on a team. Who would have thought we would have been talking about a good enough quarterback on the Denver Broncos? And I think it's really funny that they paid $84 million to get Russell Wilson out of there. And now Russell Wilson has a better chance to make the playoffs than they do. I just find that hilarious. So it really speaks to situations and coaching.
It
I mean,
does.
flat out. Lamar, Sutton, Taylor, Mixon, Robinson, Andrews are all on bye for me in one of my leagues, and I'm playing for the last playoff spot with the other person. Same record, basically same points for. I'm done. AT, I don't think you are. I mean, you built this team hoping that you would win and wouldn't have to worry about this week. But miracles can happen. You can always pick up the Juwan Johnsons of the world, the Trey Tuckers of the world, and you only need one. You only need 1 week. You can make it. I mean, there's a veritable hodgepodge of players right now. It just sucks that, you can't really you're going to have to drop other pieces to pick them up.
AT, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is this is one of the lowest projected total points for of the entire season. So if you're ever going to get away with it, it's this week.
Yeah. And here's the thing, AT, I don't know if your trade deadline has passed or not. But if it hasn't, maybe you think about pulling a fast one. Just saying. I mean, it's likely that your trade deadline has ended. But if you could pull a fast one and pick up guys that have like a good matchup this week just to get you in and then seeing what it looks like on the back end, like a Rico Dowdle kind of thing, who knows? If I do drop Fairbairn, there's Parker Romo and Aubrey I was thinking of grabbing to replace Fairbairn. Aubrey's good enough. I mean, I just laid down the framework for a Parker Romo and Aubrey this week. It's better to walk in the week knowing you are going to have the potential to get points than a 0.
Yeah.
Okay. So especially if you're not, whether you're fighting for a playoff spot or not, if you're walking into a week knowing you're getting a 0, that sucks. Wumbo, I think my fantasy starters are as immediate family, my handcuffs as pets, my benches, cousins, and kickers, and defenses, the people I see at Walgreens once a week. I find that funny. And if they stop showing up at Walgreens, it doesn't matter. There's always somebody else. There's always somebody else that shows up at Walgreens for you and bothers you at their self-checkouts that they want to push, but they never decide to work. And then you get a big-ass receipt, and you're like, I bought 1 piece of chocolate and an iced tea. Why am I getting a 3-foot-long receipt? I don't understand why pharmacies do that. I get all the coupons, but there's apps for that. I don't need a paper copy of all those coupons just to throw back in the trash, especially if the coupons are about health and beauty products that I'm never going to buy. I mean, it's just a ridiculous waste of time. Is Myers a good play at kicker this week at Arizona? Nick, I think it's a reasonable play to pivot on to one of those kickers that we talked about. Myers is an option. Okay. Myers is an option, but it is definitely a lower floor option. Looking back over the last 5 weeks, you have an 11-point performance, a 16-point performance, a 12-point performance, and a 2-point performance. Okay. So where I'm looking at is that the extra points, and he missed an extra point, which led to that performance. But if we just take the last 2 as a sample size, he also missed an extra point, and you don't really want your kickers missing extra points. I think that he's good enough, but I would rather move into a guy like Dicker if he's available. I'd rather move into a guy like Sanders if he's available. And take that and take those.
My only advice for kickers is pick based upon the weather this time of the year. Don't pick.
I'm holding off on Romo until after this week and thinking of streaming Myers this week. I think it's reasonable, but I don't want kickers that can miss extra points. That to me is like the death knell of a kicker. If you're missing extra points, I can't trust you. Like if you're missing a significant amount of extra points, he's missed 3, but again, he has the 8th highest extra point rate, but he has you come down and look at it, he has the 23rd most field goals made. So where's the upside? That's the other thing when it comes in. Where's the upside in that? Zai, locked in the bye this week at first place. Love to see it. Lost Taysom Hill. Don't love to see that. And it's a shame. You don't want to talk about players too much. I think we talked a little bit too much about Taysom Hill, Joe. I think they got word on the sticks out of New York and said Taysom Hill needs to hurt his knee. These guys are talking. Everybody's talking about them too much. I don't have a back.
To answer your question here, Z, my answer is going to be Gesicki. And the reason is my thorough belief that Higgins will not play and Gesicki goes off when Higgins does not play.
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't need a tight end this week, I can also, without looking at matchups right now, if the
You also
only
know he'll
thing,
be in a shootout every game because their defense can't stop anyone.
if the only thing that's stopping Ferguson is the concussion, if he comes back and assumes the volume that Luke Schoonemaker has, I think that he could be a valuable asset. So in this order for your team, I think that I'd go Ferguson, Gesicki, Gray, and Johnson.
Yeah.
Especially looking, at where you're at. If you need a play this week specifically, Ferguson's a great option. Okay.
Boom.
If he's playing,
I'm talking about Z.
Zai, I love to see it.
You can pick them both up. Pick them both up. There you go.
Yeah, I'm picking up Ferguson this week. If he plays, he's going to have a good amount of volume. We just saw, and I don't really like.
And when Higgins doesn't play, Gesicki wins for you.
We just saw Frymouth have a good game. So dumb, Wumbo. So dumb. And watching it on replay, and you're just like, how? How did that happen? But it happened. I mean, miracle worker sometimes. Miracle worker. Nick, starting two running backs this week.
Oh, Bijan Tracy, man. With Spears back, that one's easy.
So here's the thing. Bijan's in a tough matchup this week, okay?
He's Bijan.
But he's the best player by a mile.
Yeah.
And so I think with the volume that he could command, I mean, again, we saw Connor go 17 for 68. So if Bijan could approach that with the chance at a touchdown, I think it's safe to say that Bijan's a great play. I'm on Bijan and Tracy, but I would monitor what the coaches are saying about the volume for Pollard. Because if Spears goes for just one carry, and I mean, Pollard only had 8 carries this game because that game got out of control fast for the Titans. I don't see that happening this week. So if the volume is going to be back for Pollard and he gets, like I said, 23 carries or 23 overall touches, and Spears goes to like the 7-8 touches, Pollard can have a really good game. I was projected as 108 versus 136 and ended up winning 147-87. Tons of people put up stinkers every week. You should never count yourself out. Never count yourself out at all. I get 3 coupons where it's like spend 50 to save 7. Next fit or something. If I'm spending 50 at Walgreens, I'm clearly in a horror spot in my life that a $7 coupon isn't going to help. Here's the other thing.
$7 and $7, Wumbo.
For anybody that shops at Walgreens for any necessities, Walgreens never gives you coupons for the things that you want to buy. And if you're getting a coupon, and anything you get a coupon for usually couldn't be bought cheaper at Walmart.
Yeah. So
Walgreens is only for if you need like children's Tylenol because your kid's sick and you're on your way home from work and you don't want to go to Walmart. It's if you're out at work or you're at like a function and you're like, oh, I need to stop in for an iced tea and Walgreens is closer than the gas station. That's where Walgreens is for. The fact that Walgreens has all this other like trading cards, toys. Why am I buying a toy at Walgreens? I don't know. I wouldn't. You are welcome, Zai. With the celebrations getting crazier and crazier as the year goes on, why is the go for getting a first down just walking down the field and pointing forward? It's always been the case. I mean, tradition is tradition. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at on that. Yeah, I mean, you might have to go Romo when it comes to kickers, and the fact that I don't want to say that's my kicker, but I do own Romo in one league. That is my kicker. So I mean, I'm always for that. I buy coffee when it goes on sale for $8 because it's the same price as the store, and when I get frozen pizza, it goes 2 for $10. That's the thing. It's true. Joe, you're more likely to be able to answer this question because you've been to a game closer than I have.
It does not. And here's the major thing. This is a chemical fact. Stuff doesn't smell as bad when it's frozen. So that's fact.
Nick, I don't play Madden, but Joe and his brother.
We play NCAA. Because Madden has destroyed itself ever since they took away create a play, which was about 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the last Madden I played, I don't get to play a lot of video games. I have a little boy. Joe has a little boy. Joe?
I'm teaching him, dude. I taught him what a cover 2 is.
Yeah, I mean, there will
3
be
years
there
old, he
will be
understands it.
days. There will be days. But I'm lucky sometimes.
Nick, that's why it's now owned by an insurance company for the slip and falls.
I mean, here's the thing. Life comes at you fast. It really does.
That's why I got to buy insurance.
But the fact remains is that Heinz Field. I'm not going to oversell how bad Heinz Field is, guys. I'm really not. I mean, I went to an Ed Sheeran concert there with my wife. Not this past summer, but the summer before that, when she was pregnant. And I told her, I said, tickets were cheap up in the top realm. And I said, we appreciate it, Nick. Tickets were cheap up in the top. And I said, she has a fear of heights. And I said, are you sure you want to sit up there? And she goes, yeah, I'm sure. And I was like, are you sure if you have a beer, you want to sit up there? Obviously, she was pregnant, so she didn't end up drinking a beer. But when we bought the ticket, she's like, yeah, I'm fine. We get up there. She was done. She was done. I was like, baby, just sit down. I'll go get some chicken fingers, whatever. And the bad thing, too, is the choices of the food suck.
Oh, yeah. It's not like Philly. It's not like over the link where you get yourself a Philly cheesesteaks.
Like, I don't want to eat a Permane sandwich while I'm sitting next to some guy that's like throwing up because they drank too many $9 Miller Lights. I don't want to do that. It's just weird.
I'm telling you.
And Wumbo on the Walgreens, they have the stupidest sales. It is so dumb. It is logistically one of the worst stores to shop at for any necessity. Like, I understand this because I went in and I did have to buy children's Tylenol. And I was looking and it was like, and I was like, oh, maybe they have vinegar because I was trying to fix a problem with my toilet. I couldn't find vinegar, but I found like vats of other things. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why can't I find 99-cent vinegar, but I can find like $12 chocolates?
And this is the preview of the off season, and when Bob wants to keep it going.
But Nick,
yes,
it is
there
true.
Are 3 non-cloudy days a year. They're never in the winter.
We had a really, really mild fall. I mean, it was beautiful for a very, very long time, and then we pivoted. Just like in November for a hot minute, there was like 5 days straight of rain. And now it's just cold.
It's going to be like 34 degrees for the rest of the year.
And Mr. Wumbo, we'll leave it at that. Sorry, we're out of this. Is logistically happened. I was looking at the shelf. Their freezer was broken. They didn't have ice cream, but you can get lipstick and bug spray. I mean, for $45. What do we do? They still have DVDs from like 10 years ago that they're trying to sell for $20. It's like Rite Aid. It makes no sense. No sense.
So announcing next week, Walgreens is our corporate sponsor.
Yeah, iced coffee is always a good thing to go for. I do like myself a hot tea as well. And the ATM never works. They want you to use a credit card, and they want you to get your credit card skimmed when you go to a Walgreens. All right, guys, we'll be back again tomorrow, 3:45 Eastern Standard Time. We'll talk a little bit more DFS. We'll talk a little bit more lineups, and we'll hope to answer a little bit more questions more solidly.
Survive the buys, baby. Survive the buys.
Survive those buys. We'll be back tomorrow, 3:45.
Welcome to Local Football Flavor, connecting the fan bases of the NFL.